Welcome back to XSOAR Engineer Training. This is part 11, Indicators and Auto Extract and Enrichment. Now in this video, we'll review indicators in XSOAR and specifically how they are created and enriched through the process known as auto extract and enrichment. This includes how indicators are extracted and enriched, indicator types, using auto extract for incident types and in playbooks, controlling auto extract and enrichment, and lastly, creating and using custom indicator types. And with that, let's get to it. Let's start by walking through how extraction and enrichment works. We've navigated to an incident within our XSOAR instance. If we view this incident and even the indicators tab, we can see the indicators that are currently associated with this incident. Next, from our command line interface, let's just type something in. What is 4.4.4.4 and hit enter. As you can see, XSOAR has identified this as an IP address and has extracted it and created it within the XSOAR database. If we take a look at the IP and into full view, we can also see that the IP address was run through our configured threat intel integrations, in this case autofocus, our random threat intelligence integration, as well as our virus total integration. Let's try that one more time. And this time we'll type in the CLI what is 8.8.8.8, escaping the periods within the IP address. If we hit enter, we can see that XSOAR has realized that this is also an IP address, and we can click it and see that it has run it through our threat intelligence integrations. In addition, if we look at our indicators tab for our incident, we can see that the two indicators that we typed in have been automatically associated with our incident. So how did this happen? Well, to explain, let's go take a look at our indicator types within XSOAR. We'll go to Settings, and Object Setup, and Indicators, and then lastly, Types. XSOAR has quite a few indicator types out of the box. We can see that we have standard indicators for things like IP addresses, or domains, or files. But we also have other indicator types such as threat actors, or campaigns, which may be useful as part of your use cases. But to explain how our IP address got into XSOAR, let's take a look at our IP indicator, which is for IPv4s, and we'll click Edit. Firstly, indicators are extracted using regex. Here we can see the regex that is used for an IPv4 address. When we typed our IP address into that war room chat, XSOAR extracted that IP using regex, which is also built to account for the escaped IP. Next, XSOAR ran the extracted indicator through a formatting script. In this case, the unescape IP script, which removes the formatting, so we ended up with an actual IP as an indicator instead of our escaped one. Lastly, XSOAR enriched the IP address by running the reputation command for this indicator, in this case, the IP command. This is how we got the verdict back for each of our sources, be it autofocus, virus total, or random threat intel. It executed the IP command to enrich the extracted and formatted IP that came from our war room entry. To demonstrate on another indicator type, let's take a look at the URL indicator type. In this case, if we click Edit, we can see the regex that is used to extract URLs. We can see the formatting script that will be run on those extracted URLs. And lastly, the reputation command, in this case URL, that will be run to enrich that URL indicator. If we take a look at our configured threat intel integrations, in this case autofocus or virus total or random threat intel that we're using just for this training, we can view the commands that are available to them. In this case, for autofocus, we have the IP command. For virus total, we also have the IP command or the URL command. And these are those reputation commands that XSOAR is using to enrich the indicator and get back the verdict from these integrations after the indicator has been extracted. Now that we understand how indicators are extracted and enriched, remember when viewing indicator types in XSOAR that they are extracted using regex. They may be formatted using formatting scripts, and they are enriched using configured reputation commands. Also be aware that for indicators such as campaign, which has no regex, no formatting script, and no reputation command, this is an indicator that is not eligible for auto extract and enrichment, but it could be created in other ways, such as using built-in commands, or more commonly through threat intelligence feeds. Now, a common question is how we can control extraction and enrichment of indicators within XSOAR. To start, we can control extraction of indicators by setting exclusions. From our settings menu, we can pivot to Advanced and Exclusion List, which is where we can add indicator exclusions to prevent them from being extracted at all. For example, we set up exclusions to prevent IP addresses from the private ranges from being extracted as IP indicators within our system. If we take a look at the 10 dot and edit this, you can see that this CIDR range has been excluded, and it will not create the IP type indicator within XSOAR. This prevents it from being extracted, as well as enriched using configured reputation commands. We can add exclusions to exclude specific indicators or known good indicators from being extracted and enriched within XSOAR. For example, we can add a new indicator for the paloaltonetworks.com domain and exclude this as a domain type indicator. This means that this won't be extracted and won't be enriched through our threat intelligence integrations. Indicators using regex of our own. In this case, we could add a regex to exclude any URL from the www.paloaltonetworks.com. This way, if anything comes in, we won't be enriching those for URLs that we know are good. In this case, adding our regex, telling it to exclude only URLs, and adding it to our exclusion list. This helps reduce our false positives, as well as reduce API calls for any known good indicators, or in the example of our internal IPs, prevents the extraction and enrichment. As for internal IPs, we sure hope that VirusTotal doesn't know anything about them. One thing to call out, if the indicator is already within your XSOAR system, for example, we excluded the paloaltonetworks.com domain, but if we pivot over to our threat intelligence to see our IOCs, we can see that this indicator is already in here. Adding the exclusion doesn't delete it for us, but we can also delete and exclude that indicator from within the threat intel page as well. Indicator exclusions help us prevent indicators from being extracted and thus enriched from within XSOAR. However, for indicators that are extracted, we can also control the enrichment part in two places. Firstly, on the specific indicator type, we can exclude integrations from running the selected reputation command for that indicator type. For example, to prevent automatic enrichment of extracted IP addresses from VirusTotal, we can edit the IP indicator type and add VirusTotal to the list of excluded integrations that will not run the reputation command. This means that when the indicator is extracted, it will run the integration command for all integrations for which we have not excluded it. Now, in order for this to work, we would need to perform this for all the commands that VirusTotal has available. For example, VirusTotal also has the URL command, so we would need to come into the URL indicator type and also exclude VirusTotal from running that command. This would be the same for the domain, as well as file indicators from VirusTotal. Another option that's a little bit easier is to set the integration instance to not run by default. This will exclude it across all integrations within XSOAR. To do this, we can hit cancel, go to integrations, and look at VirusTotal. And on the integration settings, we can set do not run by default here at the bottom. This will mean that when an indicator is extracted and it goes to enrich, it will not use the VirusTotal integration as part of that process. We can test this out by going back to our incident and repeating our test. In this case, what is 6.6.6.6? We'll hit enter and pivot over to our war room. You can see that XSOAR has extracted this, but if we take a look at this IP indicator, you can see that in this case, the VirusTotal integration was not used as part of the enrichment. The next thing we want to call out is the reliability of our enrichment integrations and how it pertains to the ultimate verdict that the indicator gets as part of enrichment. If we look at our indicator for the 4.4.4.4 IP indicator, we can see that our random threat intelligence integration, again being used only for this training, returned a malicious verdict. And as a result, the indicator was set to malicious, even though VirusTotal declared this to be benign. This happened due to the reliability setting on this integration. Reviewing our verdicts, you can see that the reliability for our random threat intelligence integration is currently set to A+, while our VirusTotal is set to C and autofocus is B. The reliability on the integration instance is what can ultimately determine the verdict. In this case, because random threat intel was set to a higher reliability, then its malicious verdict won out. However, in this case, we should probably set random threat intel to be much lower than the other two. We can do this by going to Settings, looking for the random threat intelligence integration, and reconfiguring the reliability score on this integration. In this case, we can probably set it to an F. We can retest that change for the reliability. Again, going back to our incident, we'll just type in a URL, and we can see that that's been extracted as a URL from the war room entry. If we take a look at the URL and take a look at our verdicts, we can see that autofocus returned benign, while random threat intel once again returned malicious. But in this case, because we had set the random threat intelligence integration to a much lower reliability score, autofocus won out. So as XSOAR engineers, we recommend reviewing your enrichment integrations and set the reliability appropriately to ensure you get the best results back. We can also configure reliability on threat intelligence feeds within XSOAR, and we recommend reviewing the XSOAR admin guide on indicator management for more information. Next, let's talk about where we can enable the auto extract and enrichment process, as well as the different options we have. You've seen through this video that we can extract indicators using the command line interface, typing in what does 7.7.7 question mark and hitting enter to run it from our war room. However, as we saw in video number 2, we can also set up extraction rules to occur on incident creation by incident type. Here we are in Settings, Object Setup, Incidents and Types. And if we take a look at our XSOAR Engineer URL Alerts incident type that we set up in video 2, you can see that we can set up indicator extraction rules that happen on incident creation, on field change, and even extracting specific indicators from specific fields. Setting our indicator extraction rules on incident types allows us to extract indicators on incident creation or on field change. We can also be extremely granular as to the type of indicators that we extract from a given field. For example, if we look at our suspicious URL field that we set up back in video 2, you can see that we told it to extract both URL and domain indicators from this field. For more information on this process, please refer back to video number 2. Next, we can set the indicator extraction method on specific playbook tasks. For example, if we navigate back to our URL Alerts playbook and click Edit, and then look at the Lookup User and Active Directory task. Viewing the Advanced tab, we can set the indicator extraction mode on this specific task to allow us to extract indicators and enrich them, again using regex and reputation commands for the inputs as well as the results of this specific task. Now we have 3 options available to us, and they are as follows. First of all, inline. Inline means that indicators are extracted and enriched as part of either the creation of the incident or as part of the playbook task running. In the context of an incident, the playbook will not execute until the inline auto extract and enrichment process has completed. In regards to playbook tasks, such as the one we're looking at it, this means that the process of inline extraction and enrichment will happen before the task completes and we move on to the next task. Next, out of band. Out of band means indicators are extracted and enriched, but the playbook running or the task completing is not blocked. You want to use out of band extraction if you don't require the indicators as part of executing the playbook or as part of the following tasks. And lastly, none, which is the system default for playbook tasks. This disables indicator extraction and enrichment and is recommended if you don't require it. You'll save API calls, you'll reduce false positives. So if you don't need it, you can set your playbook tasks to none, which is the default, or you can disable auto extract at the incident creation level based on incident type. Now, in order for an indicator to be created and associated with our incidents, as we saw with our war room entries, we either need to use auto extract on incident creation or as part of our playbook tasks. We're going to demo this. So let's take a look at a custom incident type, in this case XSOAR engineer extract indicators. If we take a look at this indicator type and its extraction rule settings, you can see that we have disabled indicator extraction on both incident creation as well as field change for this particular incident type. If we take a look at the playbook for this particular incident type, pivoting to our playbooks library, and we have our extract indicators, we have 3 tasks within this particular playbook. One of them will extract indicators using inline auto extract. In this case, we've set under the advanced tab for it to be inline. The others will do out of band. And then lastly, we'll do no extraction. And all of them will run the extract indicators built-in command, extracting indicators from the incident details field. Let's create a new incident that uses that custom type as well as that playbook. Click New Incident. We'll change the type to XSOAR engineer extract indicators. Give this a test or a name. We'll call it training. And then we set it to extract indicators from the details field. So we'll just throw an IP address in here. Click Create New Incident, and we'll pivot over to it to see how it runs. As you can see, we have no indicators that were extracted, even though we do have that IP address in the details field. This was because we disabled indicator extraction on incident creation, so it did not try to extract this. From our playbook, we can select the indicator extraction method that we would like our playbook to perform. In this case, let's start with none, and we'll have it run. Reviewing our incident, we can see that we did extract an indicator. However, we still do not have any indicators showing up on the panel. If we review the context for this particular incident, we can see that our extract indicators did place that IP within the context. But as we selected the task that has the auto extract set to none, no indicator was created within XSOAR and associated with our incident. So let's rerun the work plan and this time select the inline option. Pivot over to the work plans and we'll let this rerun. In this case, when we're going to select the task that we want to run, let's select inline and we'll hit mark completed. Popping back to our incident info page, you can see that that indicator was actually created and enriched. This is because we selected that inline option. So as XSOAR engineers, it's something to be aware of. If you do require the indicators from your playbook task or from incident creation, we do need to specify either inline or out of band in order to have those indicators extracted, enriched, and associated with our incident. We can also use built-in commands to work with indicators and even associate them to our instance. For example, if we take a look at another playbook that we've built, in this case our XSOAR engineer indicator built-in commands, this playbook leverages 2 built-in commands to manipulate incidents. The first one uses our create new indicator built-in to create a new URL indicator with a value of https xsoar.pan.dev, which is our XSOAR developer site. The next task in this playbook uses the associate indicator to incident built-in command to associate an already created indicator with our given incident. In this case, associating our 4.4.4.4 IP address with the incident ID that it is run against. Let's take a look at how this playbook runs against one of our incidents. We're back on our previous incident. We're going to switch the work plan to use that built-in command playbook. Look for XSOAR engineer, and we'll run the one that uses the built-in commands. From here, you can see that the indicator and the associate indicator tasks run successfully. If we switch back to our incident info page, we can see that the 4.4.4 IP address, as well as the xsoar.pan.dev URL indicators, have been associated with our incident. So while auto-extract does a lot of the heavy lifting for us, remember that we can also use built-in commands to work with indicators as well, with these being just a few different examples. Lastly, we have the option to create our own indicator types within XSOAR. For example, we excluded the internal IP CIDR ranges to prevent these IP indicators from being extracted and enriched in our XSOAR instance. We can see an example of this if we pivot back to our war room and run our chat command again using these IPs from these internal ranges. As you can see, XSOAR did not extract either of these, as both of them have been excluded by our indicator exclusions. However, what if we wanted these IP indicators? Well, for that, we can create our own custom type, assuming we have the proper regex. To set this up, we'll pivot back to Settings, Object Setups, and Indicators, and Types. We'll click New Indicator Type. We'll give it a name. We'll call it Private IP, as we do need it to be unique. And we'll supply some regex. This regex is designed to only extract indicators from the private IP ranges, so our 10 dot, our 172, as well as our 192.168. For the formatting script, we'll reuse the one for the unescaped IPs. This means that if we enter a private IP where it has been escaped, it should format it nicely for us. In this case, we don't have a reputation command that is built to return reputation around this, so we can leave it blank. Lastly, we can set a couple other options, including selecting the layout for our IP indicator. We'll reuse the one for out of the box, but this could be created and customized as well. We can hit save, and we can go test our new indicator back from our war room. In our war room, we'll rerun that command, hitting enter. You can see this time XSOAR did extract both IP addresses, in this case creating them of the type private IP versus the IP out of the box indicator. This happens because we excluded the CIDR ranges for just IP indicators, but not our new custom one, which allows us to create indicators of this type from those types of IP addresses. We can pivot over to the indicators panel, take a look, and see that those private IPs have now also been created and associated with our incident. Lastly, a word of caution. When creating custom indicators, and most especially when doing it through auto-extract, make sure your regex is really, really good. You'll want to test this thoroughly on your development instance first. Overly permissive regex may result in too many indicators, so always test first. And with that, let's review what we did in this video. How are indicators extracted and enriched? Indicators are extracted using regex. This regex can be viewed on the indicator type. If the indicator does not have regex specified, then it must be created using built-in commands or can be created from things like threat intelligence feeds. Indicators are enriched by running the reputation command that is set on the indicator type. For example, IP addresses are enriched using the IP integration command from enabled threat intel integrations like autofocus or VirusTotal. Remember that you can control extraction and enrichment. Extraction, you can use indicator exclusions to prevent indicators from being extracted and thus further enriched. And for enrichment, you can exclude integrations from running the reputation command on that specific indicator type. Alternatively, setting do not use by default on the integration instance will prevent it from being used for all indicator types as part of the auto extract and enrichment process. Remember that you can set auto extract and enrichment in a number of different places. Firstly, on incident types, you can set up indicator extraction rules on the incident type and specify the extraction that will or will not occur on incident creation or field change specific to that incident type. Next, you can set up extraction on playbook tasks based on their inputs and results, and this is done per task via the Advanced tab on that task. Lastly, you can extract indicators based on manual tasks run from the XSOAR command line interface or chats, as you saw in this video. Remember the auto extract and enrichment options. Firstly being inline, which performs indicator extraction and enrichment before starting the playbook or completion of the playbook task until those indicators are extracted and enriched. You'll want to use inline extraction when the indicators are required either before the playbook executes on incident creation or the next task executes during the playbook. Out of band performs indicator extraction and enrichment but does not block execution of the playbook or the following task. Use this when the indicators and their information is not immediately required as part of the playbook. And lastly, none. None disables auto extract and enrichment. If no auto extract and enrichment is required for your incident type or for your playbook task, it is considered best practice to set it to none. Indicators are associated with incidents through the process of auto extract and enrichment. If you specify inline or out of band, then the indicators are extracted and enriched through that process on incident types or playbook tasks and are automatically associated with that incident. You can also use built-in commands such as associate indicator to incident or create new indicator to associate the indicators with your given incident. As XSOAR engineers, we recommend you review and understand the default settings for indicator extraction for your server from the Cortex XSOAR admin guide. These defaults can also be changed via server configurations. At the time of this training, the defaults are as follows. For incident creation, as well as manual notes or chats in the war room, as like you saw in this video, the default is inline extraction. For field change on incidents, the default is out of band. For playbook tasks, the default is none. And for manual commands ran from the XSOAR CLI, the default is out of band. Remember that you can control the verdict of indicators enriched through the auto extract and enrichment process based on the source reliability. You set the reliability on your configured threat intelligence enrichment integrations or on threat intel feeds based on how much you trust them. We highly recommend reviewing the Cortex XSOAR admin guide for further detail on source reliability for enrichment integrations and intel feeds. Lastly, remember that you can create custom indicator types that can be extracted via regex. For example, you can define the custom indicator type for private IP addresses. Make sure you thoroughly test your regex to ensure it extracts properly and efficiently. It doesn't create unnecessary indicators as a result. And with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.